So I'll just mention the story because Meital left it to me. I found out that I'm allergic to bee stings when I was a child, and a bee stung me inside my mouth. Half of my face swelled up. I won't tell you which half, but you get the point. And since I know I'm the last obstacle from your lunch, I hope to make the talk interesting. Anyway, we can end actually this talk right now if you like your bank. I mean, unlike me, if you go into the bank with a smile on your face, you enter the branch, Itzik or Bracha from the branch greet you with a smile, you're out in 5 minutes, you don't have to sign 1,000 forms without reading them, then we can end it right now. If you're more like me and you think that banks are traditional and probably a bit old, then cryptocurrencies in a way offer an alternative. Very briefly and highly level speaking, cryptocurrencies is a medium of exchange. It's a currency, just like the shekel, the dollar. It's a currency. It can be used to exchange stuff. The main difference from traditional currencies is that it's not controlled by a central authority. There is no Bank of Israel that decides how many shekels to print. There is no Federal Reserve. Actually, it's users who come together and agree on a set of rules, and then they use the currency by the rules on which they agreed upon. And I'll mention that blockchain, which is also a buzzword, is the technology behind most known cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin, Ethereum are the known ones. Blockchain is actually the technology behind them. Now you can ask yourself, is it difficult to create a system where you have no central authority? If you take away the bank, the governing body, is it difficult to create such a system? And I'll try to explain with an analogy. Think of taking a group of young children, 5-year-olds maybe, putting them in a room together with all the ingredients to create pasta. You might put some supervising parent there, you know, to control the activity, and maybe if you come back after an hour, you'll get something edible. Now imagine the same scenario, a group of young children in a room with all the ingredients to create pasta, but you take away the parent. Probably in the end, instead of something you can eat, you'll end up with something you can wear, right? And I'll show you one aspect throughout the next 3 examples in which why designing such systems is difficult. So imagine 4 players who want to run some currency between them. The 5th, we'll call her Alice. Well, she has $2 in her bank account, and she wants to pay Bob one of her dollars. Now in the first example, by the way, we'll assign the variable n as the number of players. So here in the example, n equals 6 because we have 6 players. And in the first example, we have a bank that controls and governs the money. A bank means that it knows the balances of all the users. It knows Alice has $2 in her account and Bob has 0. Now what does Bob has to do what does Alice have to do in order to pay Bob one of her dollars? Well, she simply has to send a message to the bank saying, hey bank, I really love you. Take one of the dollars from my account and transfer it to Bob. The bank checks and sees that Alice has $2 and moves one of them to Bob's account. Right? So Bob can come at any later time to any of the other users who use dollars, swipe his credit card. The credit card is authorized against the bank, and he can buy a can of soda, for example, for $1. Now, what we'll be looking at throughout the next 3 examples is the following question. How many messages does it take to make one payment? Now, a message is graphically illustrated here by an arrow, right? So the answer here is 1 message. Alice simply has to tell the bank, hey bank, I want to pay Bob $1. Let's continue with this example. 6 players, but now Alice has 2 Bitcoins in her account. Instead of a bank, we take it away. Bitcoin is an ungoverned currency. There is no central authority. Now, for reasons I won't have time to go into, when you don't have the bank keeping tabs on the balances of all the users, we actually need the users to know the balances of the different players. So we need the different users to know that Alice has 2 Bitcoins, Bob has 0, and Alice wants to pay Bob now 1 of her Bitcoins. So what does Alice have to do in order to pay Bob 1 of her Bitcoins? Well, now she has to tell everybody in the system that she wants to pay Bob, right? So that everybody that receives or hears from Alice takes 1 Bitcoin from Alice's account and moves it to Bob's. If Bob can come at any later time to any of the other user and will want to buy a can of soda for 1 Bitcoin, 1 Bitcoin is, by the way, worth about $70,000, so I don't know how many cans of soda you can buy with it, but they know that Bob has 1 Bitcoin, so they'll allow him to use this 1 Bitcoin to buy this can of soda. How many messages does it take here to just make 1 payment? Well, now it takes n messages, right? Because Alice has to tell all the players she wants to pay Bob $1. We consider a message from Alice to herself as a message as well, again, for simplicity. But it's actually even more complicated. I don't know if you've read the book Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, but I'll let you in on a secret. Alice might be malicious. She's not this goody two-shoes figure that we've all read about. What if she does the following? What if she tells Bob one thing? She tells him, hey Bob, everything is fine. I want to pay you 1 Bitcoin. So Bob takes 1 Bitcoin from Alice's account and transfers it to his own. But like I said, Alice is malicious, so she tells everybody else a different message. She tells them, hey, I only paid Bob half a Bitcoin. So while everybody else thinks that Bob has half a Bitcoin, Bob thinks he has a whole Bitcoin, right? So when Bob will want to buy this can of soda from any of the other users, they won't allow him to use this Bitcoin because they think he only has half a Bitcoin. So we want to design a new protocol. In this new protocol, we don't trust Alice. We'll call her Malice, I don't know, malicious Alice. So malicious Alice, we want to detect if she's lying or not. We trust everybody else, again, just for the sake of the example, but we want to detect if Alice is lying or not. And the new protocol goes as follows. If you hear from Alice directly, you don't keep it to yourself. You gossip. You send a message from Alice to everybody else. Another user, if it hears something from Alice, it doesn't keep it to himself. It takes the message and sends it to everybody. And that goes on for all the users. If you receive something from Alice, you echo it. You send it to everybody in the system. Now, imagine you're a user. You receive multiple messages, right? So you can start comparing them. You hear directly from Alice telling you that she paid Bob 1 Bitcoin, but you also hear from Carol and Dave what Alice told them. So if all the messages you receive are the same, you know that Alice is not lying. She's correct, right? But if you see different messages from different users, you know that Alice told the different users different messages or different stuff. So you can detect if she's lying or not. And that's great. There's no bank. There's no trust in Alice as well. But the downside is there are so many arrows, and I know because I created the presentation. Actually, if you count the number of arrows, it's n squared, because every user sends a message to every other user, and it piles up. And if we compare the 3 examples we just saw, well, in the first one, we had a bank that only required us 1 message. Let it be 10 players or 100 players, still, only 1 message to make 1 payment. Second example, where there was no bank, but we could trust Alice, well, that required n messages, right? 10 players, 10 messages. 100 players, 100 messages. And in the last example we saw, where there was no bank, but we couldn't trust Alice, well, then we had n square messages. So 10 players requires 100 messages. 100 players requires 10,000 messages, and you can see how it grows in a quadratic way. And that's exactly where my research comes into play. I try to identify key bottlenecks in protocols similar to the one you saw here. And ultimately, I try to create good pasta out of them. Try to identify the key problems in these protocols and improve them. To reduce, for example, the number of messages needed for one payment would allow more payments to take place concurrently at the same time and would allow the currency to scale to more users. It can also be the time it takes to confirm one payment. Imagine you going to a vending machine, buying a can of soda, and then having to wait 30 to 60 minutes just for the payment to get approved. That's what actually happens in Bitcoin today. It can take tens of minutes just to make one payment approved. So even if you don't trust your bank, I try to identify and improve these protocols so they would be able to more usable and be able to scale to more people. So thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Hi, thank you for the interesting talk. I have two questions. First, is it really decentralized? I mean, is there no one that governs the system? Because I think there is, ultimately a server somewhere, so maybe there is someone who does.
So decentralized means in a way that it's distributed. There are many users who run it at the same time. So there is no single server, single user who uses it. Everybody who joins the currency takes part in the system itself. So it's not decentralized so it's not governed by one entity. I mean, countries can impose regulations and try to regulate it in a way, but usually most cryptocurrencies are just run by the community. So it's not a single server that runs the currency itself.
Okay. And the second thing is maybe a little naive, but don't you want to create a system or a protocol that does want to trust its users?
So you think you should trust the users or not? I'm not sure.
That's what I'm asking.
In
if
general,
you can create a protocol in which you do want to trust your users and create a system that is based on trust.
So you can create a system where you trust the users only, for example, if you know who enters the protocol or not. So if you know who the players are and you absolutely trust them, then of course you can improve the protocol by assuming that they can't lie. But in general, in Bitcoin, in most cryptocurrencies, anyone can come and join or leave at the same time. So I don't know about you, I don't trust everybody. And that implies stricter measures just to, to enforce the safety of the currency itself.
Hi, thank you for a really wonderful talk. I think it was a really great explanation of this topic that you hear a ton of stuff about. And I'm wondering, Bitcoin or cryptocurrency is a very special distributed system, but there are other distributed systems. So I'm wondering about cross-play, like how much in your discipline do you talk about other systems? Like I come from neuroscience, so I'm obviously thinking of one very specific, relatively distributed system, but you could think of it in more ways, so I'm wondering what.
So the answer is the world is distributed, right? I only gave Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as an example. But even if you look, at the beehive, which is not even a computer protocol, bees cooperate together to, find pollen, right? So that's a form of distributed system. So there are so many distributed systems out there. I focus specifically in my research on protocols with malicious users, ones that we can't trust. And that limits to some of the aspects, but it's wide enough, at least for me, to conduct my research.
Hi, Tamar from Hebrew University. So I'm going to go into the cryptocurrency. Is that your research specifically? I mean, that's the first question. Is that or not, or something more global?
So it's my main area of research. Yes, during my master's, I focused more on cryptocurrencies. During my PhD, I broadened my research to more distributed systems with malicious activity, but the cryptocurrency is one great example of such a system, yes.
So these people are mining Bitcoin, and have cracking machines, I assume, and they're cracking passwords. And I think you explicitly said this, but so we don't trust Alice. She's Malice, right?
Yeah.
So how do we trust the rest of the community that they're not, cracking passwords and malicious as well?
So only for the simplicity of this presentation, I showed an example where only one user cannot be trusted. In general, Bitcoin is safe, for example, as long as the majority of the users are honest, they're correct, and they don't lie.
How do you measure that? Sorry.
Sorry?
How do you measure that they're being honest?
So you can't measure it, but as long as 51% of the users are honest and you can trust them, then the currency will work. And so, yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Michal from the Weizmann Institute. So I have a question about cryptocurrencies that, I heard there are types of cryptocurrencies that are fake, that are fraud, like Squid Games and etc. So my question to you is, are these protocols also can be used to protect the users from malicious currencies and not only from malicious users?
So most of these currencies which are, I don't know how to call them, but they're not the main cryptocurrencies. The main ones, such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, there are hundreds to thousands of different cryptocurrencies. The main ones are pretty secure. The ones which just pop up and during hype times, where the value of one Bitcoin rises, usually leads to more scams. Those ones, you invest with your own risk. Even in Bitcoin, you invest with your own risk. But these are so much more worse in terms of their stability.
Thanks. So my name is Omer, I'm from the Hebrew University. I wanted to ask if we can transfer information based on the currency itself. Like the currency can be the message, and by that make everything more simpler.
So I won't have time here to go further into details. Bitcoin is used exclusively for money, for exchange of money. But there are other cryptocurrencies which are used for broader things. I don't know if you've heard that Walmart is trying to, make its distribution via blockchain. So if you want, we can talk about it more, the different types of blockchains. And yes, some of them can be used to more than just a currency.
In your example, you showed different players that all have, sorry, I'm Pearl from the Hebrew University. You showed different players that all had sort of like the same weight on the system, but like if you have a much more heavy player, wouldn't that introduce some sort of like centralization in the system?
Great question, yeah. So I haven't talked about miners, which are usually the ones creating more and more coins, especially in Bitcoin and other popular cryptocurrencies. So yes, if you have large miners, they have more weight in the system itself, so it leads to more centralization. Actually, it's one of the major problems of most cryptocurrencies today. Yes.
Hi, Alon from Tel Aviv University. So it's a kind of a meta question, but why do the research community insist of calling it the currency and not just crypto assets? As as you said, it doesn't have the functions of an operating currency. For instance, it cannot be used in a normal everyday exchange in any meaningful way. Speculation is extremely central to its operation today, etc.
So I think it's just a tradition. I mean, Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency. It started in 2008. It's not a long tradition, but that Bitcoin, again, was used solely for currency, a medium of exchange. And crypto is one of the technology it uses. So the term was in the original paper, and I think that's just a habit, a tradition in the community.
2 minutes, so we have time for one more question. Yoni?
Really interesting. I was wondering if there's like a domino effect of losing trust. If I start cheating, then it causes other people to start cheating, and will it increase and then sort of destabilize, and how do they deal with it?
So there have been thefts, of currencies and people cheating, but so far it seems to work. I'm not saying I'm recommending to invest in it. Obviously, if I would have been a good investor, I've been in the Caribbean by now. But it runs for over a decade or so, and it seems to work fine. So that's the only answer I can give.
Thank you, Oded.